Hey, I'm trying to get things set up here. We've got a few people on the live stream. Hopefully it'll get a little bit busier. Want to check the audio, make sure everyone can hear me. Can you guys just write in the live chat, just yes, George, we can hear you. Is it all working today? Hopefully we've got this thing streaming and it's not going to be... yes, it's fine. Yes, it's fine. Sebastian's telling me it's fine. Okay, very cool. So let's just get right into it, guys. Sebastian, as you can see, is on the live chat. He's going to text me the super chat. So if you've got a question, you want to make sure I see it, do a super chat, and Sebastian will send that to me in real time. House cleaning or housekeeping. We've got the 4th episode of the educational series with Patrick Ceresna from Macro Voices coming out. Should come out today. It's definitely coming out this week. And that's where we go over how to use options to speculate on gold to really increase your upside and reduce your downside. So if that's something you're interested in, make sure you watch out for that video either today or tomorrow. We're going to post that ASAP. You're going to love it. And also in that video, you're going to find out about a way that you can join myself and Patrick next Friday, the Friday of this week, on an actual live session where Patrick is in the market executing trades. So you can watch him live and be a part of that. It's a really, really fantastic opportunity. So make sure that you're looking out for that. And oh, one other thing. If you're not on the email list, make sure that you do that at georgegammon.com. We had an awesome contest last week for those people who are on the email list. Check this out. What we did is we told them to take a clip of themselves, like a video clip with their phone, doing their best step number 2 or step number 3. And they emailed those clips to Sebastian. And Sebastian is going to go ahead and select a couple people, whoever did the best step number 2 and best step number 3. And we're going to feature them on a video this coming week. So when the transition goes from step number 1, instead of me saying step number 2, it's going to cut to the person who won the contest saying step number 2. So it's a lot of fun. Now you can't enter it anymore. It's just for those people who were already on the email list last week. But that just gives you an example of some of the really cool content. I have additional exclusive content on the email list, but we also do a lot of fun stuff like that as well. At least we will be doing more of that in the future. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that video. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We'll probably do that tomorrow. But anyway, okay, let's dive right into the super chats. I think we had a couple last week that were stragglers and I didn't have the chance to answer them. So let's go through those right now. We had Baron. Thank you for the super chat. Asked, how did you become so not knowledgeable in the Fed and central bank? I think I might have answered that, but it was just obsessing over macro since I retired in 2012. It's weird. When I get into something, it's just kind of my personality, for better or for worse. I just go in, I just dive in, and I get super obsessive about it. And as a result, I often kind of figure out more stuff, or I learn more things in a month than most people learn in like a year or two, because I'm just obsessed with it 24/7. And that's what I did with macro. But it's all self-taught. And trust me, if I can learn this stuff, you guys can learn it a lot easier for sure. And yeah, I forgot today is Easter. So happy Easter. What, boy, you get locked up like this and you forget about it. And you kind of, yeah, we should be remembering that it's a nice holiday, and it's hopefully all of you are enjoying it. Okay, AF Visions asks, great truck deals right now. Oh yeah, we answered this. Yeah. He said great truck deals right now. 0% interest, 84 months payment, new truck fixed rate, still strong. Dollar still strong. Yeah, okay. So I answered that. I don't think regardless of the interest rate, I don't think it's ever smart to buy a new vehicle, a new truck or anything like that. It just depreciates too fast. If you have to buy a new vehicle, then yeah, now might be a good time to do it. But a car is not an investment. It's a depreciating asset, and you're going to lose money on it almost 100% of the time, unless you're a real pro and you know what you're doing. Or, of course, if you buy a used car, then you can make some money. Okay, now starting with today's super chats. RM Griffey, thank you for the super chat. Asks, how should savers change their thinking when faced with an environment that punishes savings? Should we be taking advantage of cheap credit, or to start businesses, or take out mortgages for investment properties? Well, usually I like investment properties with 30-year fixed rate mortgage. We've discussed that many times, so I won't go into the details of that. But right now, obviously, I'm a little concerned about the real estate market. Even in the linear markets, I think there's some downside. I think it goes back to the numbers, and the numbers you should be most I think the numbers you should consider most should be the cash flow, and then the micro stuff like the neighborhood, the school districts, the just how rentable it would be on a moving forward basis. That's what I'd look at right now. And if you can find something where the numbers are just dynamite, you're getting a 1% RV ratio, it's everything lines up, then I'd go ahead and pull the trigger, because you're getting cash flow that could be disrupted in the form of rents. That's not likely though, unless the cerveza sickness deal lasts years instead of months or a year. But if you don't find the perfect deal, then I'd go ahead and hold off a bit, because I think you're going to have some better opportunities potentially in the next year or so. And even if the market as a whole doesn't go down a lot, because that generally takes a lot of time, I think you're going to have more opportunities to find a super motivated seller. And in real estate, you always make money on the buy side. It's always the buy side. And I think there's going to be a chance that again, not enough coming out to the market to really dramatically drop prices, although that's a possibility. But just instead of finding one motivated seller per year, I think you're going to be able to find 10 or 20 or 50. So hopefully that makes sense. As far as cash, it's punishing savers, that's for sure. I just keep some dry powder in the form of T-bills, just rolling them over. And to be clear, guys, I'm not talking about treasuries. A lot of people, when I say T-bills, they say, "What, George? You're crazy. I'm not going to buy a 10-year treasury. That's the worst thing you could do right now." No. I'm saying a 3-month treasury or a 3-month T-bill where you get 100% of your money back, or slightly more maybe, in just 3 months, not taking all that inflation risk. But I think in the next 3 or 4 months, we're going to have a lot of opportunities to put your cash to work in a way that will be a lot better than having it in the bank, and definitely a lot better inflation hedge. As an example, when we went down, not the absolute lows, but we were close to the lows, whenever that was, 2 weeks ago or something like that, week and a half ago. And I bought some of the coal. I talked to you guys about that. The shippers. I bought just your basics like Shell. I bought Exxon. And What else? I can't recall, but just a couple like that. And I just rather have that portion of my portfolio in those hard assets just because I got them cheap. They could get a lot cheaper, but I got them cheap. And obviously I'm up a lot on them in the last week and a half, but I'm actually kind of bummed out about that because I don't like it when the stuff I buy goes up. I'd much rather have it go down so I can keep buying it cheaper and cheaper because I just want to have it for 10 years, 15 years. So I guess my point there is keep some dry powder because I think in the next year, you're going to have some opportunities to buy some stuff that will serve you a lot better than having cash in an interest rate environment where real yields are negative. Zoomer, thank you for the super chat. Thank you, George, for the live sessions. How do you explain the last week's market, and did we miss the March lows? I don't think so. Anything's possible, Zoomer. And I'm not saying my conviction rate is like 90% that we're going to go back down to those lows or go down even further. But I'd say the probabilities, in my opinion, are rather high that we're going to go back down. I think really what's going to happen is everyone's going to assume that we're done with the cerveza sickness because we've kind of, the curves, and I'm not saying this is the narrative now, but in the next couple of weeks, the curves flattened out. We don't have to worry about it. Everyone back to normal. Let's all go back to work. And whew, thank goodness we got through that. It was just... that really sucked, but now we can get right back to a fantastic economy and getting back to where we were 3 months ago. And then what happens is everyone goes back to work and the infection rate starts going back up again. And then I think people are either going to be quarantined again or they're going to self-quarantine. They're just going to say, listen, I don't want to deal with it. I'd rather go to fewer movies. So even if the economy, quote unquote, opens back up from a legal standpoint or a regulatory standpoint, I don't necessarily think that people are going to open back up by choice, at least not the way they were a couple months ago until we get to a herd immunity type situation or a vaccine. Until we get to that point, you're just kind of on, off, on, off, on, off. You go into quarantine or lockdown, let's call it. And then everyone comes out of lockdown and then whoop, the infection rate goes back up. Then we go right back into lockdown. So I think that's probably what you're going to see. We come out of lockdown and we see the infection rates go back. Now all of a sudden people realize there's going to be a second wave and the market hasn't priced that in. And then it starts to go lower. That's my base case. But again, I could be completely wrong. And that's why it goes back to what I always say. You don't try to time the market. You don't try to figure out if we're at the lows or the highs. You just analyze the prices of assets right now. And if something is super cheap, then you buy it. And if something is expensive, then you sell it. And it's just like a week and a half ago when I bought a lot of the things I just talked about. I didn't know if that was the bottom of the market. Back then, that looked like the market was going down a lot further. But I still went ahead and bought just because the stuff was cheap. William, thank you for the super chat. Hey, George, have you ever considered doing a podcast with Andreas Antonopoulos? I have not. I'm assuming that's a Bitcoin person. And I'd love to. I think, what I do typically, guys, is I do interviews with people that I want to talk to really bad, like just me personally. And it is quite selfish, I'll admit. I apologize. So what I do is when you guys give me suggestions, I give them to Sebastian and I kind of put them on the list. But before I get to those, I try to be a little more aggressive in targeting the people that I just personally want to talk to. And hopefully it'll all work out for the better. I know if you guys haven't watched the interview I did yesterday with Lynn Alden, oh my gosh, holy cow, you guys are missing out. You have to watch that interview. You will love it. The comments were amazing. The feedback was incredible. That gal is sharp. I mean, she not only is she extremely sharp and knowledgeable, but she has a way of communicating that's very easy for the average Joe or Jane to understand. And I actually texted her yesterday and said, "Hey, Lynn, you got to come back on. Everyone absolutely loves you, and they just got so much value from that interview." And she says, "Yeah, for sure. I'm happy to come back on anytime and discuss macro." So I'm really, really excited about that. But my point is that's an example of someone that most of you probably wouldn't have known, but she's someone that was right at the top of my list, and I think it worked out well that way. So keep giving me the suggestions. Eventually I will definitely get to them, William, because I value your opinion. But what I do first is I try to talk to the people that I just really want to talk to myself. Right or wrong, I apologize. I just that's just where my motivations are, I guess. Zoomer, thanks for the super chat again, buddy. Hey, George, where do you see the great opportunities in the market? You know, something I read today that was really interesting. And for those of you who subscribed to Chris McIntosh's newsletter when we had the affiliate promotion the other day, I think you're just absolutely loving it as much as I am. But Chris came out with a report today that I just had the time to read maybe half of it. I didn't get the time to read all of it. And he was talking about something very interesting about buying airports. And he said we might not be there yet because a lot of them, the balance sheets are still really poor. But he started to isolate airports that have a decent balance sheet, but they're getting really, really, really cheap for obvious reasons. And I think regardless of what happens with the cerveza sickness over the next 6 months or year, I mean, come on, the population is still going to be growing over the next 5, as long as we can see. And over in 5 years from now, are people going to be flying just as much as they were 3 months ago? I mean, the answer has to be yes, in my opinion. And he isolated, if my memory serves me right, he isolated an airport, I think it was in Spain, that is publicly traded. And what's great about airports is they're pretty much monopolies, and that's a good thing. When you can buy a monopoly that's super, super cheap and might pay a really good dividend, that's something that really got my my wheels turning. That's for sure. So that's right on the forefront of my mind because I just read it. As far as the stuff that Chris and I talked about on the last couple interviews, it was coal. It was, you know what else he was talking about? Is that uranium. A lot of the supply for uranium is coming offline. It's not like there was a lot of supply before, but because of what's happening. And so that could be even more interesting than it was a month ago. That's another thing I bought a couple weeks ago when markets were really down. I bought uranium. And that's actually done extremely well. And I bought gold miners, and of course I always buy gold. Whenever I have extra money, I always buy that. You guys know that well by now. But that's kind of where I'd start right now is commodities might be cheap. And then in the future, I would just look for individual sectors of the stock market where we could start seeing some opportunities. The banks are pretty darn cheap. I know my sister texted me the other day that Wells Fargo got down low enough to where it was paying like an 8% dividend. And I know they have a lot of problems. And I'm obviously no fan of big banks, but hey, if you could get like Wells Fargo to 10% dividend, that might be interesting. Free thinker, why not go heavy gold till houses on sale? because none of us have a crystal ball. You can't, there is no certainties in life. There, you can't say, well, gold should go up for XYZ reason. And you're 100% right. I mean, no one thinks the fundamentals are more bullish for gold than I do. And a lot of people that are a hell of a lot smarter than I am. You just listen to Macro Voices or Real Vision, and pretty much every super smart guy or gal on there is saying, listen, the fundamentals are great for gold right now. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to go up 100%. Even if there's a 80% chance that it goes up, you don't want to have 100% of your portfolio in that. And this brings me to my point earlier in the live stream, that if you have to have 100% of your portfolio or 80% of your portfolio in gold, watch my series with Patrick. Watch the final episode in the educational series that comes out today. You have to watch that, because that gives people the kind of the game plan or the strategy to structure your portfolio in a way that if you're really, really heavy gold or whatever it is, you can do that to where you're limiting your downside and you're letting your upside just really ride. And that I would never suggest going heavy. I'm assuming you're talking about 70, 80%. But if you're going to do that, then make sure that you watch that video, that episode 4 with Patrick and I that comes out today, because it's going to give you a way to really hedge your bets there, so you don't have much downside, and you've got and you've got a lot more upside. I'll just leave it at that. Marcos, thank you for the super chat. It says step number 2. And one of one giveaway video chat. Okay. Oh, maybe you're suggesting something we could give away as far as like an email, a contest for the email list, maybe, Marcos? If so, yeah, I think that'd be a great idea. Steven, thank you for the super chat. Some people are saying if the Fed injects $4 trillion, but the markets goes down by 10 trillion, that isn't inflationary. The problem here, Stephen, is that people are looking at inflation as though it's a kind of a monolith, like it's this blob, and it all just goes up at one time or goes down at one time. We have to have inflation. That means everything goes up, or we have to have deflation when everything goes down. And in real life, it doesn't work that way. So think about this. What they're doing is, okay, so if the Fed injects $4 trillion into the markets and it stays in the markets, then yeah, it's not really inflationary is from a consumer price standpoint, because you're basically taking the money and hiding it under your mattress. It's not, or you know what, the way you should look at it as you should look at it as though stocks and financial assets are just goods and services. So we know that when you have more money chasing the same amount of goods and services, the prices of those goods and services go up, assuming that velocity stays the same. We all know that. But it's the exact same with stocks. If the supply of stocks stays the same and there's more money or liquidity chasing the same supply of stocks, then they're going to go up in price. You're going to see inflation. But if the people sell those stocks and then take that money to buy consumer goods, and the supply of consumer goods is going down dramatically because of deglobalization, because of supply chain disruption, you name it, then you could see asset prices or those stocks going down in value, even though the Fed's injecting money, and you could see consumer prices going up. I'm not going to say in value, in price. So inflation, although it seems very straightforward, it's actually incredibly complex and it's very nuanced. And the more nuance you can add to the way you view inflation or deflation, I think the better off you're going to be and the better decisions you're going to make for your financial future. Andres, thank you for the super chat. If digital dollar is created with 1-to-1 ratio fiat, how would that prevent hyperinflation? I hope you're enjoying Colombia. Please visit Barranquilla. I listen. I retired in 2012, so I could live literally anywhere in the world that I want, and I choose to live here. So that says a lot. I really, really love Colombia. It's just a fantastic, fantastic place. Obviously not real fun right now. No place is, but I'm in Medellin. It's really awesome. And I have not been to Barranquilla, but I've been up to Cartagena just actually about a month ago. I went up there with a gal, just a quick vacation. Been to Santa Marta, obviously Bogota, Cali, but I like it right here in Medellin the best. But I might take you up on that as soon as we're done with the cerveza sickness. Take a trip up to Barranquilla. Okay, so back to your question. If digital dollar is created with 1-to-1 ratio to fiat dollar, how would that prevent hyperinflation? I don't know that it would prevent. I don't know that it would prevent hyperinflation other than if we had a ban on cash and all the quote unquote currency was in the banking system and the Fed had control of that because it's based on the distributed ledger that the Fed would have control of. They could see every transaction. They could control every transaction. And if velocity got high, they could take out money supply through a variety of different ways, none of which I think the average Joe would like very much, because it would go like they could lower the money supply, but you could still have money creation throughout the commercial banking system. That's where money that gets into the real economy normally is created, or it's expanded, or where it contracts. So the Fed, so you're getting into a really complex topic, and I don't want to go down the rabbit hole too far here, but my point is I don't think that would totally prevent hyperinflation. For more on this, guys, the video I'm doing tomorrow, which you guys are going to absolutely love, is the government-backed digital currency and how that really works and how it would truly affect our lives. And I'm looking at this from an American-centric standpoint, but whether you're in Australia, the UK, Sweden, Germany, it doesn't matter where you are. You could be here in Colombia. It's all pretty much the same. I think governments are going to use it the same way. So make sure that you tune into that video tomorrow, where I'll dive into this a lot deeper. Graham, thank you for the super chat. I've got cash that I don't know what to do with. I know you said treasury bills are better than a money market account. Yes, they are. How do I go about buying treasuries? You can just go on the government's website. What is it? Treasury gov. I forgot what it is. Just type in buy treasuries in Google. I'm sure it'll pop right up. Or you can just buy them through a typical brokerage account. Hey, Ryan, thank you for the super chat. Doesn't look like he's got a message. I appreciate it. K. Bakken, thank you for the super chat. Home is about 50% LTD or LTV, excuse me. Should we consider a refi to pull out what we can for the home price is correct? What do you think mortgage rates will do in the short term? See, again, I don't like to try to think about what mortgage rates will do in the short term, because what you're asking, what that question implies is, George, should I wait for better rates, or should I pull the trigger now because I think rates are going up? So what are you doing right there? You're picking bottoms and tops. We don't want to do that. That's the wrong question. The question should be, George, do you think mortgage rates right now are cheap? And that's a much easier question to answer. And that, yes, they are very cheap. So I just really want to encourage everyone to get into that mindset. I know it's so difficult. And even if you watched my last interview with Chris, even I fell victim to the same impulses. And I asked him, I said some type of question like that, and he had to correct me. He said, George, I don't know. I don't look at it that way. I just look at what's cheap and what's expensive. I should, sure, of course, I should just take my own advice. Going back to the first part of your question, home, let's see, should you pull out equity? I think it really depends. My answer would be twofold. Number one, if you think you've got a better opportunity coming up for the equity in the next year, and it would justify the carrying costs, I would consider it. Or, and this is the second part, if you're very concerned about losing your job and you might need a cushion to get through the cerveza sickness and get through to the other side where you can get a job again, then I would consider it. And I hate to say this because I know it's such a bad idea to use your house as an ATM machine, but the bottom line, guys, if we go into well, obviously we'll go into a recession, but if we go into a big depression and the credit markets really start to freeze, you're not going to be able to get a bank loan. I don't care how good your credit is. They just won't give it to you. It's just like it was in 2012. I mean, I had fantastic credit. I was buying houses with cash. I owned 100% of them. And I would go to the bank and try to take out a refi or even get a line of credit, and they wouldn't even give it to me. So you've got to understand that we look at credit as though it's always accessible, that as long as we've got equity in our house, that, well, we can always just go to the bank and do. That's not the way it works. Ironically, the banks are completely, they're a complete contradiction in the sense that when it's most dangerous to lend money, when we're right at the top of a market, they're lending money like it's going out of style. They're giving it away, right? And then when we're at the bottom of a market where prices are cheap and people should be buying real estate, then you can't get a home loan if you've got an 800 credit score. So it's a bizarre mentality, but that's just the way banks are. So we can't change it. It just is what it is. My point is that if you're really concerned about your job, you might want to consider doing that, because then that will give you a little cushion until we get through the cerveza sickness, where I don't like it, but compared to the other options, I think it might be something to consider. If you didn't have any one of those options, I really wouldn't try to. I don't know if I'd try to gamble with it at 50% LTV, because you're only going to get maybe an extra 20% out of the bank, and then you got fees and all this stuff. So Yeah. Hopefully that makes sense. Free thinker. Which linear market? Thank you for the super chat. Which linear market in the U.S. To prioritize for research? Obviously, I like Kansas City. I would research there. Go research Blue Springs, Lee's Summit, and I'd probably stick with those. If you really knew the area well, I think you could go into parts of Raytown and Independence. But if you don't know the area, I'd stick with Blue Springs and Lee's Summit. As far as the Kansas side, I'd stay away because it's very landlord unfriendly. The laws are much different in Missouri than in Kansas. You want to be in Missouri if you're a landlord. And for the other markets, I would go on to Jason's website, to jasonhartman.com, and look at the markets where he has inventory. And that's where I'd start to research, because no one's going to do as much homework as he's done with his team. So I just piggyback on that. Tui Volt, thank you for the super chat. Says, Happy Easter. Thanks for all the great videos. I appreciate it. Marcos, thank you for the super chat. Do you think buying gold and silver, wait for deflation, and then buy real estate would be a good strategy? I don't look at it that way, Marcos. Maybe I'm crazy. I mean, I'm probably crazy. I just don't look at it that way, because I don't think, if we're viewing our investment strategy through the lens of blackjack, right? You guys know that I always suggest doing that, because blackjack is just a game of probabilities. And if you can have an edge in your portfolio, if you have a mathematical edge, the longer you're in the game, the better chance you have of being ahead. If you don't have an edge, if you don't have the probabilities on your side, even though you might win in the short term, over the long run, you'll always go bust. So I just think that if we're trying to look at things this way, it's very tough to get the probabilities in your favor. So I would rephrase this question here. I would say, do I think it's a good time to buy gold? And the answer there would be yes. It's always a good time to buy gold, because it's your insurance policy, regardless of the price. But it's just 10% of your portfolio that you've compartmentalized and you've allocated to that specific task. You've given gold a task. It's not to make me rich. It's just to keep me rich. That's your job, gold. So I want you to do that. So now with the other side of my portfolio, I either want to get paid or I want to get rich, right? So the part that I want to get paid, now I'm looking for stuff that obviously pays me to own it. The stuff where you want to get rich, that's the speculative side of your portfolio, but only 10%. And we've got to keep the probabilities. We've got to make sure that those speculations have extreme asymmetry to them. So as far as silver, I would say yes. I think it's a good time to buy silver for the speculative side of your portfolio. I think you've got great asymmetry there, but it's only at a max 10%, and I'd like some other things on the speculative side as well to have some diversification. Then real estate. Then what you're doing is you're assuming, and buy real estate. Yet you're assuming that those appreciate, real estate goes down, and I would look at real estate as its own separate category. And that, is it cheap right now? If you can find something that's cheap, great, pull the trigger. If not, go ahead and wait. And then if it gets to a time, or if we get to a time when real estate is cheap based on the cash flow and the debt, or whatever other metrics you're using, then I'd go ahead and look at gold and silver. But I would never sell gold. I'm not saying that I wouldn't sell it, but I would very rarely sell it because it's not its job. As far as the silver, I guess you could look at silver compared to real estate. So if silver goes up a lot and it goes up to $100, let's say, and then it becomes expensive, and then at the same time real estate's cheap, then yeah, I'd go ahead and think about selling it. But again, they're completely different parts of your portfolio. So I mean, I wouldn't do that because I'd sell the silver, but then I'd look for another speculation in silver. Or I'm sorry, I'd look for another speculation other than silver. So I just wouldn't really combine those things. I think that's what I'm trying to say. Ryan, thank you for the super chat. Will consumer staples go up through the roof if we do hit stagflation? Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much the definition right there. Stagflation, you're going to have high consumer prices. The CPI goes up while at the same time you have high unemployment and very low real GDP growth. So you have nominal GDP growth, but when you actually adjust for the inflation, it's at 0, maybe 1%. I think that's my base case. You guys probably know that I've beaten the dead horse in all of my videos over the last 2 weeks. I just see kind of a 1970s type deal here. And not that I see that in the next 6 months, but if I was looking into the next 3 years or 5 years, that's how I see it playing out. It's just a low growth economy. I totally understand the people who see us as Japan. If you guys didn't watch my video on that, I'd strongly suggest it. I outlined some of the main key differences, but I get that argument. But I just think the Fed is going to print so much money and they're going to do so much helicopter money and so much MMT that it's actually going to get into the hands of the consumers. And then we just don't have any exports. What we do, but we're obviously, we have a massive trade deficit. And long term, that's not good for the dollar. And we don't have any savings. And if you don't have any savings, you can't buy assets. And if you don't have any assets, you don't have any way to sell things when you, or if you're not saving money, then you're not accumulating assets. That by definition means that the velocity is rather high because as soon as you get the money, you have to spend it right away. And especially people in the lower income brackets, then they're definitely spending every single dime they get. So that's the big difference with Japan there. But that's kind of my base case. Again, it's nothing's certain, but we'll have to see how it plays out. Nolan, thank you for the super chat. Comedy Central just has called up just has called you up to the microphone for you to roast Dave Ramsey. What are you going to say? I don't think I need to say anything because all you have to do is listen to Dave Ramsey for about a week and he roasts himself. I've never heard a person in my life that contradicts himself with such arrogance and certainty. It's, if you're someone in the world, obviously this would not apply to any of my viewers on my channel, but if you're not really that bright and you're not bright, it's not a big deal. The people who are really dangerous in our society are the people who aren't that bright, but they think they're real smart. And I'll let you guys put 2 and 2 together there. That's all I'll say. You guys know I don't like to throw anyone under the bus, but there's a couple people that I will throw under the bus. And to be honest with you, the main reason I do that, it's not necessarily because I disagree and because he contradicts himself so often and he's just kind of an arrogant prick, for lack of a better word. and he thinks he's great, and he tries to dupe people into believing that annual rate of return is something that is significant just so you buy his mutual fund. Or it's just such garbage. But I could actually live with that, and I really wouldn't discuss it too much. What he really did that I just have, that's been a chip on my shoulder for so long, is when he attacked Peter Schiff's dad. When I heard him attack Peter Schiff's dad, that was it. It was game over for me. Ever since that point in time, and that was back in maybe 2012, I heard him do that. I just, there's nothing he can do to make up for that, because it wasn't just a disagreeing with Schiff's dad. He was just calling him names, and just obviously he's never met him in his life, and he's just, you know how Dave Ramsey does it. He's calling him a kook and a nut burger, and he's just, dude, you don't. Peter Schiff's father is an American hero. You've got to look at the principles behind what he did. How many of you on this live stream right now would be willing to go to jail for the rest of your life just for a principle that you believed in? Seriously, think about that. Right? And then you got this radio talk show host that is just I don't want to say anything else. That's why I have such a beef with Ramsey. I'll leave it at that. I don't want to focus on the negative. Let's focus on positive stuff here. Okay, Chuck, thank you for the super chat. What do you think about using treasuries? 26-week purchase through Treasury Direct. That's what I was trying to think of, to protect bank accounts and bail-ins. Yeah, that's what I always suggest, for sure. I don't know about 26-week. That, oh boy. If you could do something a little shorter term, Chuck, I'd suggest that's what I would do. I just hate to give the government my money for 6 months, just because there could be so much opportunity within that 6 months to utilize that dry powder. Andrew, thank you for the super chat. Appreciate it. FR Kiddo, thank you for the super chat. He says, Peter Schiff is saying that we should get out of the dollar. What are your thoughts on this, and how do you trade invest in stocks with most companies listed on the NYSE or the NASDAQ? Personally, I think you have to start by asking yourself, what are my expenses denominated in? If your expenses are denominated in dollars, I definitely agree with Schiff from the standpoint of, I think you should have currency diversification. You guys know that's my third rule, is to diversify your portfolio through typical diversification, but also through political risk and currency risk. But I wouldn't take 100% of my portfolio and buy stocks that were denominated in currencies other than the dollar if 100% of my expenses were in dollars. Because what if that goes the opposite way, right? Then you got big problems. So I think I would just be overweight whatever currency my expenses were in, but I would have as much diversification as possible. So maybe you've got 60 or 70% of your assets in dollars, and then maybe 30% in assets that were denominated in other currencies, or whatever it may be. I think if you're an Australian, you got 60 or 70% of your assets denominated in Aussie dollars. Same thing with European and euros. So I like what Schiff is saying, but I don't know that I'd go all in. I think that's what I'm trying to say. As far as how do I trade, invest, I don't really trade. I'm not a trader. I don't know if I'd ever feel comfortable giving trading advice. I'd probably refer you to people like Patrick that know more than I'll ever know. As far as investing, it's just the same thing. If I find a stock that I think is cheap, then I'll buy it. But I normally hold it for like, even if I'm losing money, I like hold it for 5 or 10 years. I just don't sell it. And so I think most people are trying to buy stocks to get rich or to increase their purchasing power dramatically. And I don't do that. I buy stocks just to either maintain my purchasing power or just have it go up incrementally and then just leverage the power of compounding returns. And ironically enough, I think if you try to invest with a mindset of just maintaining your purchasing power and doing well over a very, very long period of time, I think you're going to make more money than if you're investing just to get rich or just to dramatically increase your purchasing power. Atlas, thank you for the super chat. What is more likely, societal collapse or war with yikes? Yikes, yeah. Yeah. What's more likely, societal collapse or war with Russia, China? Also, thoughts on Rickards getting on the show. Yeah, for sure, Rickards. Rickards is someone that I personally want to talk to. Like I've wanted to talk to him for a long, long time. And I think now is a great time to reach out to him. A couple of the guys I've really held off on until the channel grows enough. Just because I want to make sure that I'm providing as much value to them as they're providing to me, in the sense that, you know, Rickards wants to promote his books or something like that. So I want to make sure that he's going to get enough views from a video that I produce to make it well worth his while, so he continues to come back, right? So that's kind of why I've held off a little bit on Rickards, but we're almost at 100,000 subscribers, and we'll probably get there sometime next week or the week after. And I think that's a great time to email them and say, hey, Jim, come on the show. So that's definitely on the short list. I really hate to answer your first question. I mean, if history tells us anything, the odds are more likely that we go to war. And I just hate that. I hate it. I hate it. One thing that traveling around the world does for you, and I've been to over 40 countries, is it gives you the opportunity to see the world from a much different vantage point than just an American-centric vantage point. I'm not saying that that's wrong. Having an American kind of exceptionalism is wrong. I'm just saying if you travel to 40 countries, you just see things a lot different. And it just, like all these wars that we've been in forever, since Vietnam, basically, and, you know, in Afghanistan and in the Middle East, and I don't know, you just look at them a lot different. And I just would, obviously it's kind of a pipe dream, but I really wish there was a lot less war in the world than more. But unfortunately, when countries get really desperate, usually that's what they do. They just blame someone else, and things escalate, and you're always trying to find a scapegoat. And so, unfortunately, I think that's probably more likely. Okay. Kaka Silva, thank you for the super chat. Although all that funny money, but still dollar strong. Yes, Silva. I did a tweet the other day, and this is the best way that I can describe it. I think you have to look at the dollar as two completely separate currencies. Look at them as domestic dollar and foreign dollar. What drives foreign dollar is much different than what drives domestic dollar. If we look at what drives foreign dollar, well, that can be dollar denominated debt. So there's a lot of demand to pay back these debts, and they just levered up in 2011, 2012. Now they can't print their own dollars, so they need more dollars to service the debt or to roll it over. Also, oil, right? Although it's down right now, of course, but oil is denominated in dollars, so they need dollars to buy oil, those other countries. So, and I could go down the list. So you've got all this demand outside of the United States for foreign dollar that you just don't have for domestic dollar. And the supply and demand metrics are different as well. Not just the demand side, but the supply side there as well. Because the supply side is, okay, tourism, how many dollars are getting out, how many domestic dollars are getting outside of the United States and turning into foreign dollars. Well, to do that, we have to import a lot more. We have to run a trade deficit, which takes us down the path of Triffin's paradox. And I don't want to get into that with this video, but that's a whole other hour-long discussion. But so my point is, then we look at the domestic dollar and what drives that. Okay, well, we've got the supply coming in from the Fed, from the government, trying to get money into the real economy. And then we have the velocity, we have the psychology with the people. Are they spending it? Are they putting it in paying off their debt, which reduces the money supply? See, all these different components. So you can have, and you often do see, the foreign dollar going up while the domestic dollar goes down. So the domestic dollar goes down relative to groceries, as an example, relative to healthcare, relative to education. But the foreign dollar goes up relative to euros, relative to yen, relative to the Colombian peso. Right? Two completely separate things. And the problem that most people have, and even economists, is they see them as one thing. Like they see them as just the dollar. So the dollar is going up. Well, how can you tell me the dollar is going up if every single time I go to the grocery store, the price of my produce goes up by 5%? What do you mean the dollar is strong, right? So I think it's just a lot easier to understand if we look at the dollar as two completely separate currencies. The high-vis economist, excuse me, guys. Using your metrics, the Millennial Financial Education Channel guy is getting a bit tepid about buying the dip with markets only down 13% from this. He now thinks this market is irrational. I'm going with SDOW in May. ST. Okay, so let me think this through here. The Millennial Financial Education Channel guy. I'm not sure who you're referring to, because there's a couple of the Millennial Financial Education Channel. Well, first and foremost, I've got respect for all, not all of them, but the guys that I know of, that I've seen their videos, I've got a tremendous amount of respect for what they do. There's a couple I kind of disagree with on a lot of things, because I'm not sure. They know a lot, but they know just enough about macro to be dangerous. But there's a couple others, and I'm not going to mention any names, that I really, really like. One, I'll go ahead and mention his name, Marco with Whiteboard Finance. I think Marco is awesome. I've actually interviewed him, and although he and I probably don't agree on absolutely 100% of everything, I think he is fantastic, and he's really got a pretty darn clear picture of macro. So I'm not sure who you're referring to, but see, channel guy is a bit tepid about buying the dip. Okay, market's only down. He now thinks the market is irrational. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise me. I don't know if whom you're referring to, but regardless, there's a lot of people that don't think that think the market is irrational because it's staying down or it's not going back up or it's not back up to its all-time highs or um, they're just they have a completely different worldview and they have a completely different view of investing in general than I do. It's just I don't know. I would say the market is irrational to be at a 23 on the CAPE ratio and 110 or 20% market cap GDP, but I'm probably looking at it from a completely different perspective. So um, that's all I'd have to say. Marco, I think he's fantastic. I think all the guys, oh, not all, but all the guys in that space that I've seen, I think are tremendously talented, incredibly intelligent. But I just I have a much different opinion on the macro, and my investment strategy is quite a bit different. Leon, thank you for the super chat or the super sticker. Keep it up. I appreciate it. Dan, with the dollar collapse in mind. Excuse me, guys. I'm going to turn on my AC. It's getting a little hot here. With the dollar collapse in mind, do you take my assets and flee New York? Where would be the best spot to start a new life? Boy, that's I don't. If you had the choice, Dan, I wouldn't stay in New York because you're just going to get crushed with taxes. I would get out of California and New York as fast as I possibly could. If your only options were to stay somewhere in the U.S., I'd just look at Texas, Florida, Nevada, something like that. If you could, I mean, I don't know your specific position. If you've got an online business, I would strongly consider Puerto Rico just because of Act 20 and 22, which they've recently changed the name. It's now Act 60, 60, if you guys are Googling it. I would research that if it's something that applied to you. Also, I would, if it didn't apply and maybe you're on a pension, let's say, I would strongly consider something like Colombia or maybe Eastern Europe, like Croatia or Montenegro, where if you've got a pension of, let's say, $2,000 or $3,000 per month, you're going to be able to live very, very well, especially in a place like Colombia. Whew. On $3,000 a month, you'd be able to live. That would be the equivalent purchasing power in the United States of probably 10 grand, probably 10, 15 grand a month. So if you've got $3,000 a month in pension in dollars and your expenses are denominated in Colombian pesos, that would be like having $15,000 a month, 10 or 15 in the United States. So I think that's a great way to geo arbitrage, as my buddy Jason Hartman always says. And it just, what's not to like? I mean, here in Colombia, where I am, you're about a 3.5 hour flight from Miami. You're on the same time zone as the United States. And it's just a gorgeous place. The weather's always awesome. The people are great. The food's incredible. And you're living like a king or queen. So I would consider that, but that's kind of how I'd go down the list. If you have to stay in the United States, at least go to some place that's low tax. If you've got the type of business that's set up for Puerto Rico, I'd consider that. And then if you're in a pension fund types or a pension situation, or it's Social Security, or just you're on a fixed income, then I'd look at going outside the U.S. and places like Colombia or Eastern Europe, specifically Montenegro and Croatia. Hi, Viz Economist. Thank you for the super chat. So the Fed buying junk bonds. Yeah. They're going to buy everything. Honestly, if you just had the mindset right from 2 months ago that the Fed is going to do anything they possibly can to make sure that prices don't go down, you would have been able to predict all this. So whenever I hear even podcasts that I really enjoy, assuming that what the Fed is doing now is what they'll be doing in a month, I think they're just not seeing it right. The Fed is going to be doing in a month whatever they have to do to prop up the prices of everything. And so I think they're going to be buying a lot more junk debt. That's for sure. Are you stupid for buying triple Bs at 10%? I know you're saying it's a rhetorical question. I mean, what's the maturity is where I'd start. I mean, if you're talking about triple Bs at 10% for 5 years, no, I don't like that, because I think you could get inflation higher than that. And I just hate to be dependent upon the Fed in order for my investment to work out. And we're assuming that the Fed is always going to be the buyer of last resort. I think that's probable, but I don't think it's a certainty. So I think you can. I'd much rather have a 10% yield in. Well, that's a good question. I think it's all about the maturity. If I could get something for a year, maybe. No, but then I don't know if you're going to be getting paid on that. I think I'm going to have to pass on that one. I just don't like anything in triple B. I don't like anything in the corporate bond market other than the debt of the companies that I'd prefer to buy the equity. So I think that's the best way I can say it. Andrew, thank you for the super chat. Hey George, I would love a video on determining, is it cheap or is it expensive? A list of graphs you reference would be awesome. Yeah, Andrew, I think where to start is just look at historical charts of whatever you're considering buying, adjusted for inflation. So if you're considering buying an oil producer because it's paying a nice dividend, and although the dividend can get cut, of course, we know that, but most likely they'll still be in business 5 years from now, and you're just thinking, okay, that's a way for me to play oil. Well, I just look at oil and go back over the last 50, 60 years, if not longer, and say, okay, what's the historic price of oil been adjusted for inflation? And if it's low right now, then I think that becomes an interesting option. Same thing with housing. That's kind of where I start. Silvio, I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong. I apologize, my friend. Many thanks for the super chat. Thank you for the super chat. What would you recommend as a safe currency? Man. They're all bad. Gold. I don't think any of them are safe. I would like the currencies of the creditor nations a little bit better, like Singapore. Singapore is a huge creditor nation. I know they've got their debt to GDP right now is pretty high, but boy, oh boy, they are a rich, rich country. I think as a percentage, they're the biggest creditor nation in the world. As a percentage, I think as a lump sum, I think it's Japan. But as far as the Swiss franc, the pound, man, maybe the Swiss franc, because I know they're a creditor nation as well. But I just wouldn't go all in with any of this stuff because you just don't know. And the United States, although fundamentally it's extremely flawed because of the demand for the foreign dollar, you could see that go up substantially. I think the dollar milkshake theory is incredibly valid. And over the short term, I think it could definitely play out. So I just don't know that I would look at it from a standpoint of, okay, what's a safe currency? Then I want all my assets denominated in that currency. I just think it starts with where are your expenses, and then making sure you've got maybe 50% there at the very least, and then saying, okay, with the other 50%, where would I like to go? And I think the creditor nation would be where I would start. But I think you got to have some dollars in there. I don't, just relative to other currencies. Again, you got to have some foreign dollars in there. I don't know if I'd have domestic dollars in there other than the assets, right? Unless it was just dry powder. There's just, I know it sounds like I'm contradicting myself there, but there's just a lot of nuance in the currency question and the inflation question, because it's all relative to other currencies. Or the inflation question, it's all relative to what you're comparing the dollar to. Shotgun, thank you for the super chat. If we go to a gold standard, how would that stop any shadow banks from creating more dollars? Fed and U.S. banks do not have control of these entities. The entities create the euro dollars. Yeah, that's a great point. There's really, I mean, you're talking about from a U.S. standpoint. If the U.S. went on a gold standard, then I'd have to think that through, because if they were creating dollars and we were on a gold standard, although they've done it according to Snyder, and I think he's got it figured out. I mean, he's done so much research on this. The euro dollar system was created way back in the 50s and 60s as a result of Bretton Woods. And obviously we were on a gold standard back then, a loose gold standard. So I think the big issue there is if the world is still using foreign dollars. That I think the linchpin there, or the catalyst, is if we go to a gold standard, does that mean that the dollar is still the reserve currency? And if it's not a reserve currency, then the euro dollar system, although they might still do loans in dollars and create money supply outside the United States denominated in dollars, it's not going to be as much. So the demand side of the equation is going to be a lot lower. And so I think what the main point of your question is to say, listen, if we're on a gold standard, but they can still print up all this money outside the United States, does that really prevent inflation? And I think I totally understand what you're saying, and it's a very well thought out question, but I think it has to do with whether or not the dollar is still the reserve currency. Brian, thank you for the super chat. Since health insurance premiums and volumes increase as you age and smoke, shouldn't you apply this logic to increasing your allocation of insurance gold as the economic environment decays? I don't know if that's I get where you're going with that, Brian. I'm not sure that's a exact analogy. I mean, just because a health insurance company is charging you a premium and your premium increases, if you can get the premium for a lower price, has logic to allocate greater than 10% insurance in gold. I just don't think so. Because see, what you're doing there, Brian, is you're assuming that someone dying from smoking is as predictable as the price of gold increasing or the price of other assets decreasing. And I don't think you can be that certain over the probabilities of gold going up in price, especially in real terms. And remember, if gold goes up in price in nominal terms only, you're still losing purchasing power, because when you sell the gold, if you do, then there's a capital gain. So if gold goes to $50,000 an ounce, but it just goes up with the rate of inflation, think about what your capital gain taxes would be. And let's also keep in mind that if we get someone that's on the left in the White House, and I don't want to go into whether that's right or wrong, but if we do, I can almost guarantee that capital gains taxes are not going to be where they are today. So what if they bump cap gains up to income? And so think about that. So, okay, fantastic. Your gold went up to $50,000 an ounce. Okay, great. Now go ahead and sell it to realize the profit, and then go ahead and pay the government 40% of that. And keep in mind that it only went up with the rate of inflation. So your purchasing power has actually decreased by, call it 40%, even though the price of your gold went from 1,600 up to 50,000. That's another reason that I'm not sure that, I mean, it's a very good comparison, but I just don't know that it would make me change my mind. I just, whenever I get these questions, it's really because people want to get rich off of gold. That's the driving factor. They want to buy gold because they know that the dollar is going to toilet paper, and that they just know we're going to get hyperinflation, and they just want to buy gold because they think it's going to $50,000 an ounce, and they want to get rich off of doing what's smart and buying the only real money that we've had over the last 5,000 years. I get it. I totally get it. Totally get it. But I just don't think that's the right reason to buy gold. Eric, thank you for the super chat. Raymond, thank you for the super chat. What is more likely, a crash or inflation followed by a crash? Are you holding any gold, silver, or Bitcoin? Yeah, always hold gold. Just whenever I make an extra whatever dollar amount, I just 10% of it, bam. Right now I can't buy gold for obvious reasons, but I'm buying RICS ETF instead, just until I can buy gold, and then I'll most likely trade it out. But RICS ETF is really neat in the sense that you can exchange, it's transferable into gold. You could go there and collect the gold. It's not like the GLD at all. So if you can't buy physical, just for the time being, because you're locked up in your house, and you can only buy paper gold, if you're going to do it, at least I've been doing it through Rick's deal and Rick Rule. And that's the ticker on that is PHYS, I believe. So just whenever I get an extra dollar amount, 10% of it is going there. So that's, yes, buying gold. Silver, no, because I already have quite a bit in the speculative side of my portfolio. Yeah, I need more investments right now. That's what I need. And Bitcoin. Not yet, although I like Bitcoin. No, I should buy Bitcoin. You're right. I really should. And I will. I just haven't gotten around to it. So the next time I get a chunk of money coming in, then I'm going to take, with 10% of that, I'm going to go ahead and buy Bitcoin. I'll let you guys know. ES, thank you for the super chat. George, thanks for all your teaching. It's amazing. How can I choose an honest physical metal storage company? Thanks, Joe. I'd look at the mint, like the Canadian mint. I'd try to diversify. And I don't want to answer that question too specifically, Joe, because I haven't used too many of the metal storage companies myself. And if I haven't used them and if I haven't researched them, I don't want to give you any advice because I don't want to steer you in the wrong direction. But I would start with probably looking at the mints in the countries that have not confiscated gold. Like the Perth Mint, I mean, they've confiscated gold. But the Canadian Mint hasn't, or Canada hasn't, not to my knowledge. So I'd probably start there. Okay, let's see here. Okay, Marcos, thank you for the super chat. He had to Google who Dave Ramsey is. I don't want to talk about him anymore. I thought it was the horrible guy from Game of Thrones. No. I don't want to talk about Dave Ramsey anymore. Okay. I guess Nukem Good is your handle there. All right. Thank you for the super chat. George, would you recommend moving an IRA into treasuries or 403B into treasuries, long and short, from Dow S&P 500? If so, for how long? As long as the dollar is strong. Man, I would not move my money into treasuries, because by treasuries, I assume you're implying 10-year, 30-year, 2-year, something that's actually paying a coupon. I would not do that. Maybe a 2-year, maybe. You'd have to look at treasuries as a vehicle for capital gains and not necessarily income. I guess you could look at it as your carrying costs would be the rate of inflation, because you're getting a negative real yield. That would be justifiable because of the upside in the price, because interest rates could go negative. I don't know, but you're doing it with your IRA, your retirement. I just think it's too speculative. I personally would not do that. And you're talking about rolling it in from the Dow into treasuries. I'd maybe roll it into T-bills. That's a different question. So if you're talking about like 3-month T-bills and just rolling it over to keep some powder dry, I'd potentially do it. But then it all depends on what you own in the S&P or the Dow. If you own stuff that's cheap, that you'd most likely be a buyer of with dry powder, then I wouldn't sell it. I'd only sell it if it was expensive. So I guess the answer to my question, I'm just trying to think this through, guys. You'll have to bear with me. I guess the answer to my question is I would not go into treasuries at maybe a 2-year, but obviously I'd diversify, and I would rather see that in some short-term stuff, to where you're not taking that big inflation risk. You got some dry powder. But if what you own is cheap right now, then I wouldn't really sell it. I'd only sell it if it's expensive. Anthony, thank you for the super chat. How can we believe the government will adopt MMT for the ordinary American when they're dragging their feet about bailing out the Postal Service? I just think it's inevitable, Anthony, because you have to look at it from the standpoint of the government and the central banks. They're not going to be able to get the inflation that they have to wipe out the debt unless they get inflation in the real economy. And it's going to come to a point where the only way they can do that is through helicopter money, because the velocity is down. You got a demand shock because of the cerveza sickness. I just think that's the only way out for them. To be clear, nothing's certain. I think that it's just the highest probability, because I don't see them being able to do anything else. Because if we get price deflation in assets, and that means the burden of the debt increases, they've painted themselves into a corner where the only solution, if you want to call it that, is inflation, consumer price inflation, to be clear, for the domestic dollar. And I just think they're going to print enough money to get it, and they're going to get it into the hands of the people. I think what they're going to come out with is an app where you just download it onto your phone, and the government, the Treasury or the Fed, just sends you $1,000 a month. I think that's what's coming. And we'll have to see what that does to inflation. It all depends on the supply of goods and services. It all depends on the psychology of those people with the money or getting the money. And it depends on if they pay down debt or how they actually spend it. That's really the key. Nicholas, thank you for this super chat. All right. Oh my gosh. Wow. We've got a lot of super chats. Okay. Sebastian, make sure we turn off the super chats, buddy. Shoot. I didn't realize what time it was. Okay. So make sure Willie is our last super chat. No more super chat, guys. I really appreciate it. But I want to make sure I get through all these to be fair to everyone. Okay, Nicholas, thank you for the super chat. What are the odds the Fed is unable to create inflation and we just spiral down the deflationary hole? Well, it goes back to the last question, Nick. And although it's possible, I just don't see it happening, because at the end of the day, the government can just issue checks. They can just write checks to everyone for $1,000 a month, $2,000 a month, $5,000 a month, $10,000 a month. There's no limit. The Fed's balance sheet is infinite. So the only way that would not work out is if there was some sort of political barrier to doing that would prevent the politicians from doing that. And of course, I think it's quite the opposite. I think the politicians are going to want to do that, right and left. So then it's just there's nothing that's stopping them. I mean, the way you have to look at it is, if everyone had their government app, and tomorrow the government or the Fed, whomever, you instantly have $1 million on that app. And we're not currently in lockdown because of the cerveza sickness, that you can go out and actually spend the money. That's not going to create inflation, consumer price inflation. I mean, it has to. It can't not. It's just a simple math equation between the money supply velocity and the supply of goods and services. And they can do that. Again, the Fed's balance sheet is infinite. It's just they need a transfer mechanism in the political will. I think the transfer mechanism will be an app, and I think the political will be there. Marcos, thank you for the super chat. If I were Russia or China or even an EU country, I would be looking at getting out of the dollar right now when America is at its weakest spot in decades. What is preventing this to happen? A lot, Marcos. First and foremost, they need a bond market. You can't just drop the dollar because that would cause a lot of problems, because you have to have a really deep bond market. And I can't really go into why right now on just a quick live stream, but whatever is the foreign, the world reserve currency, let's say it's the Russian ruble, all the other countries around the world would have to hold rubles. And then you've got the export and the import, you've got the supply imbalance, or excuse me, the trade imbalances. And then what would they do with their additional rubles? Well, they'd need to buy Russian treasuries, whatever whatever they call their government debt. So if you don't have a deep enough or liquid enough bond market, you're not going to attract the capital flows, and no one's going to use your currency on a worldwide basis. So it starts really with the bond market, ironically enough. And most people forget that. They think that, all we have to do is just, who wants to use these crummy dollars? I'm just going to use these Chinese yuan or these Swiss francs that are just 10 times better because it's a stronger currency. It unfortunately doesn't work that way. Mark, thank you for the super chat. Top 2 or 3 books you've read on growing wealth. Number 1 it's going to be just a blackjack book, like Beat the Dealer, just so you learn probabilities, because that's the key in whether you want to be an entrepreneur, whether you want to start a business, whether you want to invest, speculate. It's all about probabilities. So I'd start there. Then I'm assuming you're talking about investing. So I would read the Market Wizards books. And then, let's see, third, I'd probably read Henry Hazlitt, Economics in One Lesson, or Thomas Sowell, Basic Economics. And then I would listen to the Macro Voices podcast, watch my YouTube channel, and watch Real Vision. I'll throw that in there. Red Diesel, thank you for the super chat. What do you think about cryptocurrencies? Good, bad, or okay? I think as far as Bitcoin, I think it's good for a speculation, but I don't think it's insurance, and I don't think it's an investment. So for a speculation only, which I would only allocate 10% of my portfolio to at a very max, and then I'd have diversification within that 10%. I think it's a great speculation. Okay, S12, we'll call it that. Thank you for the super chat. I currently am waiting to buy. I had to move back with family, okay? And I'm now okay, currently working, providing essential services to public, including support for job seekers. What would you recommend? Let me read this one more time here. I'm currently wanting to buy. I'm not sure what you're wanting to buy. I don't know if you're saying, should I buy a house or an apartment or gold or a stock? I'm now okay, currently working, providing essential service to public jobs. What would you recommend? I think you're asking me, would you buy a house because you moved back in with family? I'm going to assume that. I apologize if I'm not reading this correctly, but it really depends on it depends on where you are. It looks like you're in the UK because you're paying with pounds. I just don't know what the prices are there. I don't know where you live in the UK. I don't know what the RV ratios are. I would just start with looking at the numbers. Go back to you know what I do? Go back to the last interview I did with Jason Hartman. It was, I believe, last week or the week prior. And we talk about just the housing market for the average Joe or Jane. Not that you want to invest in it. You're just looking at the housing market as an owner occupant. Should I buy? Should I sell? Should I wait? And the quick takeaways there are generally, and this is not a steadfast rule, but generally, if the value of the home is under $250,000 US, it's a better deal to buy it. If the value is over 250, generally, just financially speaking, it's a better deal to rent it. And so I'd start there, watch that video. I think you're going to learn a lot, and it's going to answer your questions more in depth. And it'll also show you how you should look at your local market to answer that question yourself. Kevin, thank you for the super chat. George, I'm selling my house and expecting a good bit of cash. Okay, cool. Should I buy real estate while banks are still lending, or should I wait till prices come down while risking not getting a 30-year fixed? So it sounds like, Kevin, you're cashing out of your house and you're looking to maybe buy real estate as more of an investment as opposed to a place to live. It goes back to what I was saying at the beginning of this live stream, where if you can find something where the numbers really, really make sense, then in a linear market, in a great area, then I would consider pulling the trigger because to your point, the interest rates are so low, cheap cash flow and cheap debt. If you can't find something that's absolutely perfect, I'd hold off. I just don't see prices being higher or dramatically higher in a year than they are right now. Nor do I see interest rates being dramatically higher on mortgages than they are right now in 6 months or a year. So what's your downside of waiting? The only downside of waiting would be if you've got a smoking deal right now and you pass up on it. So what I'm saying is, if you got a smoking deal, grab it. If you don't, wait. Golfer, thank you for the super chat. I appreciate it. Tim, thank you for the super chat. My take from Lynn Alden's interview is a debtor status will create massive equity selling pressures due to the rise dollar to service debts. Do you agree that a debtor status will create? Boy, Tim, it depends on the country you're talking about. Just because a country is a debtor nation doesn't necessarily mean their debt is denominated in dollars. Most likely a lot of it is, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. And it just means that their population don't own a lot of assets outside of the country. They just have a lot of debt. So I don't know that would create. I think you're starting from the wrong spot here, Tim. I think you should start by asking not whether the country is a debtor nation or a creditor nation, but you should start by asking, how much dollar denominated debt does the country have? And then the countries with that would line up there, that would be on the list of those countries, which countries are large creditor nations and which countries are large debtor nations. And the countries that are large debtor nations with a lot of dollar denominated risk, then they don't have anything to sell. And they're really screwed. I mean, big time. The countries that have a lot of dollar denominated debt but are creditor nations, then they would most likely have dollar denominated assets that they could sell for the dollars to pay their debt. Of course, the Fed doesn't want that, because they don't want any selling of any U.S. asset, because that means the price would potentially go down. So the Fed would most likely come in and either buy or, I mean, or borrow. They'd lend them the dollars, right? I think it's just the Fed. At the end of the day, I think it's going to be something like FEMA, which is the repo market the Fed set up for the central banks outside the United States, most of them. And yes, it's supposedly it's the Fed giving them or lending them the dollars, and those nations are using the dollar-denominated collateral like treasuries, and that's going onto the Fed's balance sheet. Technically, it's a loan, but I just think it's going to be on the Fed's balance sheet for the next 10 years. So is it really a loan? I think it's just more of a way to buy all of these dollar-denominated assets, get them onto the Fed's balance sheet, so there's never a seller in the market. Zoomer, thank you for the super chat. If Feds are going to, or the Fed is going to prop up the market, and we know they will not let the system fail, Dow low of 21,000, then why not follow their lead and invest? Well, first of all, I don't want my investment thesis to revolve around what the Fed is doing. I think that's way too speculative. And second, you're looking at things nominally. So sure, the low point in the Dow could be 21,000. Absolutely. It doesn't mean that if the Dow goes to 100,000 that you're going to gain any purchasing power. If it just goes up in fact, if it doesn't go up with the rate of inflation, I mean, look at the best performing stock market on the planet Earth over the last 5 years, Venezuela, right? But did you get rich if you bought the Venezuelan stock market 5 years ago? No, you're broke, because the money that those stocks are denominated in, the currency is worthless. So then your speculative thesis there would have to be, okay, well, I don't think inflation is going to get out of hand, and I think the Fed is going to buy everything, and so the market's at a low, so I'm going to go ahead and buy the market. Let's remember, the market was at what, 30,000? It's at 21,000 today. So the market can go down, even though the Fed doesn't want it to go down. Is it likely? I don't know, but it sure is possible. So what you're doing is you're saying, George, shouldn't I buy something that's really expensive in hopes that it'll get even more expensive because the Fed is going to make it go that direction? And I just don't think that's not a strategy. That's a gamble. And if you want to gamble with your money, then go nuts. But over the long term, I think it's not going to work out well for you. Where instead, if you just say, okay, is the Dow cheap right now? No, then I'm not buying it. Is the Dow expensive? Yes, then I'm selling it. And I'm just going to look for something that's cheap. Greg, thank you for the super chat. In my opinion, Main Street is supposed to effectualize Wall Street. Well, when that is reversed, the tail wagging the dog, and is the problem itself indicating the economy system is broken, what's the path to normalcy again? It's a good question, Greg, and I totally agree with you. The tail is wagging the dog. Unfortunately, the only path to, I'm going to replace the word normalcy with fundamentally healthy, is a recession or depression. That's it. Got to take the medicine. So there's no free lunch. There's no way to get to a healthy economy other than by getting all of the bad debt, malinvestment, and the monetary sins, if you will, of the past decade out of the system. And the only way you're going to get them out of the system is through a huge recession or a depression. And if we paper over it, it's going to be just like 2008, where, yeah, we don't have to suffer the pain from the standpoint of the asset prices, but our economy just gets worse and worse and worse. It's a lot like someone that's like 500 pounds that is smoking, and you're asking me, let's say they go into the hospital and as because of a heart attack, and then you're basically asking me, well, what do we have to do to make sure this person gets healthy again? Can we just, once they get done with the heart attack, can we just keep giving them pizza and cigarettes? And yeah, they're going to go back to quote unquote normal, but it doesn't mean that they're going to get healthy. The only thing they can do to get healthy is go through the withdrawals of quitting smoking now, and get out there and start exercising and eating a lot of things that is not going to be fun to eat. Lettuce and carrots, and just going on a specific diet. That's going to be very, very painful, but that's the only way to get that person back to a place where they're fundamentally healthy and not normal. Derek, thank you for the super chat. Don't buy Bitcoin. Schiff and Dally are right. Okay. Wiley, thank you for the super chat. George, what's your opinion on the market retesting the lows? My opinion is that they most likely will, but I could be completely wrong. I don't have a huge, like 90% conviction. Like if you ask me if gold is going to be higher in 10 years, then I've got a much stronger conviction on that. But I think that the probability is highest the market is going to retest the lows. I just think that we'll go into this thing where everyone thinks we're good to go, we're back to normal, the economy, they open back up, everyone comes out of their house, and bam, we're going to get it again because we're not at herd immunity. Everyone's going to go back to lockdown, and then the market hasn't priced that in. You're going to get back down and see another dip. Okay, golfer, thank you for the super chat. Hi, George. I'm 32 with 150K saved in California. Congratulations. Own gold, Bitcoin, silver, platinum, miners, other things like Streetwise. Do you have any good thoughts on how to escape the rat race? Looking ideas to increase income. Yes. Let's see. What would I do if I was in your situation? I mean, I would just try to see what you could potentially do online and start a little side business at nights and weekends. I mean, I'm assuming you're a golfer. Maybe you do some sort of channel or some sort of content online revolving around golf or golf instruction, or maybe you're doing reviews of specific golf clubs, drivers, sand wedges, putters, golf balls, shoes. And then I would just start that evenings and weekends, see if you can gradually grow it to a point where you're making $3 or $4 grand a month. And then I'd be like, I'm out. And then I'd move to some place where that $4 or $5 grand a month is going to give you an extreme amount of purchasing power. So, of course, using Colombia as an example, if you were in Colombia and you had a gig, you had a little side business, no, maybe not a side business, but you're even growing this business, it's online that you can work from anywhere, and you're making $5 grand a month, plus you've got 150,000 in a nice little portfolio. I mean, dude, you're all set. You're going to be living, not only are you going to be living the high life, but you can't spend $5 grand down here a month. So you'd be, let's say you're making $5 grand a month, you'd be taken 3,000. Obviously, this is before taxes, but you'd be taking 3,000 and putting it into and growing your investment portfolio. So you're 32. I mean, do that for 20 years. By the time you're 50, 52, and just do the math on $36,000 a year going into an investment portfolio. Say you can even make a 5, 6, 7% return compounded. You're going to be in a fantastic position. You're going to be doing very well. So that's what I'd do. Let's say you got a 9-to-5 gig right now. I'd just work on a side hustle and on nights, weekends, and I'd spend the next 2 years just growing that up to a point where it gave me enough income consistently. And then I'd go to I'd do geo arbitrage and then take the savings, keep investing it, and bam, there you go. Rutger, thank you for the super chat. Can the global debt problem be solved by a global debt jubilee? I've been thinking a lot about this lately, and I don't really know. I know the debt jubilee is kind of the buzzword lately, but is there really anything difference between a debt jubilee and bankruptcy? Like, other than the equity holders don't get wiped out? I don't, but then the bond holders get wiped out. I just don't see anyone going for that. Maybe there's a debt jubilee within Japan, as an example, because the majority of the JGBs, which Japanese debt, is owned by Japan. They own it internally, whether it's the central bank or the Japanese people. And I guess they could just default on themselves. They could default on the central bank. But, what does that do to the currency? But let's just assume for a moment that it didn't do anything to the currency. But if 50% of your debt is owned by foreigners and you've got the world reserve currency, I mean, you think you're going to go to China or Japan and say, hey guys, just do me a favor, and that $4 trillion you have, just go ahead and forgive that. It's just kind of water under the bridge. I don't think so. I don't know that the creditor nations would go for that. Would you? I wouldn't. So I think it's more of a bankruptcy type situation where instead of just everyone holding hands and singing Kumbaya, meaning the debtors and the creditors, it's more of a, you know what, guys, we can't pay our bills. So we're either just going to flat out default or we're just going to inflate them away. And of course, I think the most probable outcome long term, and this, not to say this happens over a year, 2 years, but long term, 5 years, 10 years, I just think the answer's got to be inflation and inflating away the debt. Tyler, thank you for the super chat. What's the most stable, sensible way for the average American to diversify currency risk? Tyler, if I was you, I would start traveling. I'm trying to think through the best way to answer this. I would start traveling to, obviously not now, but when this is in the rearview mirror, and looking for countries where you really enjoy spending time and you wouldn't mind investing. I hate to just say, Tyler, well, I'd look at Singapore because they're a creditor nation. I like all of these numbers. I like the macro stuff. Although that may be true, I just think even if you're considering, you'd need to go there first. Check it out. Spend a week or two at the Marina Bay Sands. You'll love it. You'll love it. But maybe you won't. But if you do, then I think you're going to get a better sense of the local economy. and you're going to get a better sense as to whether or not that's a place where you'd like to own their currency through the form of XYZ asset. And you combine that with the macro factors, and that's where I'd start making decisions on which countries I'd feel most comfortable buying their assets to have that diversification. But assuming that you're an American, of course, and assuming that your expenses are denominated in dollars, I think you want to have a max of or a minimum of 60% of your assets denominated in dollars, and then maybe 30-40% of your other assets in those other currencies. So, but that's really where I'd start. I'd take a macro approach to kind of do the numbers and the research to see which countries you're kind of most fond of, and then just from a macro standpoint. And then I would say, hey, my next vacation next year, I'm going to go to this place, or maybe this place, or this place. And then I just get a feel for it from a bottoms up standpoint. And then I make decisions based on those factors. Ishan, thank you for the super chat. If the Fed pours trillions now, can they even stop in a couple years? This is a good point. And stop in a couple years and raise taxes and Fed rates at the same time to stem inflation it previously caused. Is there any procedure for that? No. You hit the nail on the head. So your point is, if the Fed's balance sheet goes to 20, 30, 40 trillion, is there a way to reel that back in? Nope. Like Schiff says, it's the monetary Roach Motel. It's the Hotel California. You can check in, but you can never leave. It's the exact same thing with the Fed's balance sheet. Once that money is out there, and because they haven't, so why is that? Because they haven't fixed the economy, right? It's just, it goes back to well, I don't want to go down another tangent, but it's just they haven't fixed the economy. So they can't do quantitative tightening. They can't unwind their balance sheet, because doing so would create complete chaos. You're building an economy around quantitative easing and artificially low interest rates. You're building economy with those two key components at its core. So if you take out what you've built the entire economy around, what happens? Another good example would be Venezuela. They built their economy around oil. So what happens when the price of oil goes from $100 a barrel to $30 a barrel or $20 a barrel? Your economy blows up. So it's the exact same thing with the US economy, in the sense that they didn't build it around oil, but they've built it around QE, money printing, an expansion of the Fed's balance sheet, and artificially low interest rates. So as far as taxes, yes, expect taxes to go up in the future. And I don't think they can raise interest rates. If they do raise interest rates, the only way they would be able to do that is if real rates were still extremely negative. Kalahari Desert, thank you for the super chat. Can you explain the Greek financial crisis? Or can you make a video about the Greek financial crisis? How did Greece bail out German and French banks? Okay, I'd have to look into that, Kalahari. I understand what happened with the Greek financial crisis, but I don't know how they're bailing out the German and the French bank. Oh, I see. I'll bet you because Germany and France had a lot of their debt. I don't know that. I'm guessing that's what you're implying by your question. So if the German and the French banks own a lot of their debt, instead of Greece defaulting, then they have to go through these austerity measures in order to pay back the debt, which is bailing out the banks, basically. Yeah, it's interesting. I also think it would be an interesting topic because, and I'm sure you've researched it, it's been a great buying opportunity. Just like, maybe not now, but it was when they had their big crisis. And just like Cyprus, they had that huge crisis, and that was the time to buy. That's when blood was in the streets. So, all right, Tim, thank you for the super chat. Doesn't have a question. Anthony, thank you for the super chat. Can't the Fed government fuel asset without inflation, without consumer price inflation? Middle working class defaults, consolidation of assets, tax burden, increasing M2, third world country. The U.S. becomes a third world country. All right, let me walk through this here. So can't the Fed fuel assets without? They can. They can. It depends on what well, it really depends on psychology, because the Fed would have to buy the assets from individuals or entities in the private sector. So what do those entities do with the money? That's more of a psychological, a game theory question. But it's possible. Let's see, the working middle class defaults. Okay, so they default on a lot of their debt. Okay, I see. So you're saying that there might not be consumer inflation because a lot of the debt in the real economy defaults, therefore reducing the money supply, and the consolidation of assets, tax burden, increasing M2. Well, Anthony, you got a lot going on in this question, buddy. You're talking about defaults. Well, a default might not necessarily reduce the money supply, so I take that back. A consolidation of assets, tax burden. I don't know if that's I don't know if what you're saying specifically in this question increases M2. I think they're going to increase M2 with helicopter money. That said, if you look at the Fed's balance sheet, if you look at M2, it's been going up. It's hockey stick. So I'm not sure, buddy. I don't know that I have enough conviction. I definitely think they're increasing M2, but I'm not sure if it's through the ways that you're talking about. Third world country U.S., I don't think you're going to see the U.S. as a third world country. I just think you're going to see the standard of living in the United States gradually decrease to the point where it looks a lot like Spain or Argentina, something like that. And I'm not talking about the next year or two. I'm talking about the next 10 or 20 years. I see, especially 20 years, I think the United States from a standard of living will be very similar to what Greece or Italy or Spain is now. And so I don't see it being a third world country. There's too much infrastructure here, and that never goes away. There's too much capital, human capital. There's too much infrastructure, and we could have hyperinflation as an example, and that still doesn't mean that the highway system in the United States goes anywhere. And if you've been outside the United States, you know how valuable the highway system in the U.S. is. And I'm just using that as an example, right? So that doesn't go anywhere. The smart people in the United, although they could go somewhere, most likely you still got a lot of super smart people, got a lot of innovation happening. That's tough for it to go away. So again, I just see the standard of living decreasing substantially. But it'll probably be a lot like the frog that you put in warm water and just gradually turn up the heat. That because it happens so slowly, most Americans will never even really know that their standard of living is is decreasing substantially. I mean, how many of us know that our standard of living now is better or worse than it was in the 1950s? Well, I don't know. I wasn't alive in the 1950s, so I don't really know. We could look at some numbers, but there's a lot of moving parts there. So, okay, guys, I think that is it for the super chat. So as a reminder, make sure you check out my video today with Patrick Ceresna from Macro Voices. If you are someone that just is adamant about having 20 or 30% of your portfolio in gold, silver, oil, any of the above, then you have to watch this video because it's going to show you how to limit your downside, but really maximize your upside. And keep in mind, Patrick and I are going to be doing a live session that you can actually watch Patrick in the market executing trades. It's going to be super cool. It's going to be Friday. So watch the video and we'll have instructions as to how to do the live session. It's something that Patrick is doing with his paying members as well. So there'll be a small fee. We try to keep it under $100, about 99. But the bottom line is watch the video today and there'll be a lot more instruction on how to take advantage of that and learn about these concepts that Patrick is using in his own portfolio to really hedge his risk with his gold investments. And then make sure you go to the website, georgegammon.com. Get on that email list. So the next time we have a contest, you can be the one that is featured on one of my videos, or there's a lot of exclusive content, a lot of videos that are raw, uncut, that go to the email list. So if you're not on the email list, you are missing out. I want to tell everyone, happy Easter, enjoy the weekend, and I will see you on the next video.